taking you through the Myanmar earthquake. The Myanmar's second biggest city, Mandalay, with a population of 1.5 million, was hit by a strong earthquake this morning. The powerful earthquake of 7.7 magnitude on the Richter scale and at a depth of 10 kilometers. The epicenter was just 17 kilometers away from the main city, and that's why we see this kind of devastation. Buildings literally falling down to rubble there. Earthquake has caused extensive damage, with Myanmar's army, the army-run MRTV reporting toppled buildings, crushed cars, massive fissures on roads across the capital. In fact, the quake has caused the collapse of buildings in 5 cities and towns, as well as a railway bridge and a road bridge on the Yangon-Mandalay Expressway, the state media has reported. That was a bridge, Mandalay Bridge that you saw. The images are shocking, really leaves us nervous. If something like this happened in India, are we prepared? At least 20 people have died in this earthquake in Myanmar, with tremors being felt in several parts of Thailand's Bangkok as well. Even India and China have felt tremors. In fact, Thailand particularly, Defense Minister said that their rescuers are currently searching for nearly 81 people who are trapped in the rubble of a skyscraper that was under construction, collapsed into a pile of rubble. So that work is currently on. Those are the visuals you're seeing there of a skyscraper that went down in seconds. And 80 people are said to be missing. In addition, Thailand's defense minister has said 90 people are missing and 3 are confirmed dead. This is a visual inside the airport in Mandalay. Really shocking. One could really imagine the damage, and the toll is thankfully still not as much as what we would expect, looking the kind of scale and devastation. All right, apologies that was in fact a new studio that we were seeing. This is a new studio. I'm just playing that visual out for you so that you sink in what happened.
เฮ้ยหลบนะโหไม่น่าเชื่อคุณผู้ชมตอนนี้ตึกที่ช่อง3สั่นอย่างนี้เลยนะฮะระหว่างนี้สั่นแรงโหสุดสั่นแรงมากนะ
I'm so nervous looking at those visuals. Just like my studio here, you're looking at the studio there in Myanmar, a new studio that was completely shaking. That building there, you see water from that pool on the rooftop coming down. So news reporters who were reporting from their studios were so nervous and panicking. That's how terribly that entire studio was shaking there. Emergency has been declared in 6 regions and states that have been hit by the quake, even as rescue operations now are underway. Red Cross has flagged concerns about the state of large-scale dams in the country. Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extending his thoughts and prayers to the victims, reaffirming India's commitment to providing aid in the aftermath of the natural disaster. In fact, Modi has put out that tweet very clearly. Soon as the reports came in, Prime Minister Modi there very clearly stating, and I quote, "Concerned by the situation in the wake of earthquake in Myanmar and Thailand, praying for the safety and well-being of everyone, India stands ready to offer all possible assistance. In this regard, asked our authorities to be on standby, also asked the MEA to remain in touch with the governments of Myanmar and Thailand." The words of Prime Minister Modi on his X platform. Now, Myanmar has a history of significant seismic activity. We know that it is susceptible to earthquakes, and which is why we see that they have been, despite being prepared, this was a kind of devastation. Now, earthquakes are relatively common in Myanmar, but yet the scale of devastation we see there just leaves us worried and wondering if India could ever be prepared for something like this. And we see the Delhi NCR region often being faced by earthquakes. Thankfully, so far, it's been just tremors. But should we brace up for something as severe? What happens if something like this happens in India? Dr. O.P. Mishra, Director, National Center for Seismology and Advisor, Head Seismology and Geosciences, joining us live. Dr. Supriya Mitra, who's a professor, Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Kolkata, to give us a little more on what and how we can handle a situation like this. O.P. Mishra, please, your take first, sir. Your first response to what you see in Myanmar. You know, the devastation is so large scale. Ideally, we hear these are countries that are better prepared for quakes like this. 7.7 is really worse on the Richter scale. It's towards the worst end of it, and yet we are looking at the buildings falling. You know, the number of people who have died that have surfaced. Still, the numbers are not fully reported. So the scale of devastation could only grow in the next 24 hours. Despite them being prepared, this was what happened there. So your first take on what you see.
Yeah, indeed, it was really sad that so much devastation happened, particularly in the epicenter country, that was the Myanmar. And where the earthquake happened, it is not a new zone for seismogenesis. It was really the several earthquake of magnitude 7 and above. It witnessed in the same zone that is called a very seismic prone area and earthquake causative faults. It was the 1200-kilometer long fault, that is Sagaing fault, which was actually guarded by the two Indian, one is the Myanmar microplate and another is Sunda plate. So it is already a stress, though it was the strike slip fault, but it has generated the earthquake in the same of the 5-kilometer periphery, 7.2 magnitude. And again in 1912, 7.5 magnitude, about 10 to 15 kilometer distance, the earthquake happened. And 1991, 6.9 earthquake happened. Now the thing is that the earthquake occurred because it was the earthquake prone zone, and nobody can stop the earthquake. It is bound to occur once the shearing and bearing strength of the rock exceeded by the stress accumulation, because it was the plate collisional tectonics and there was the Indo Burma subduction zone, you might remember. So it was there, so the earthquake occurred. Now the question is that how the devastations lead to so much disasters in the form of the loss of the lives as well as damage to structure, collapse of the structures, many after effects of the earthquake. Since you can see that earthquake can hit anywhere at any point of time, it is not necessary that earthquake occurred in the particular that country, only damage confined to that country. It was a transboundary earthquake where is equal to where many country involved. The maximum damage happened to the Myanmar as well as in the Thailand, that is Bangkok, which is about 1,100 kilometers away from the epicenter of the Mandalay. This means that the rupture propagated when the earthquake occurred. Then the main shock rupture propagated up to 1,100 kilometers, and this is the all alluvial blocks that is amplified, and then it causing the liquefactions beneath the foundations of the building. So most of the building had the sinking aptitude, and it is also found that the design was not so apt to withstand the earthquake shaking, because earthquake shaking frequency is
You're saying
either
that's
is equal
not earthquake resistant construction, the construction there that you see or you believe is not earthquake resistant? And if they are prone to such seismic activities, we would assume they should be better prepared, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, this shows that whatever the building damage, they are not resilient to 7 magnitude of the earthquake or 7.5 magnitude earthquake. So damage had happened 7, but it was followed by many aftershocks, 7, and already now it is 4.3 aftershocks recorded, 10 aftershocks. So the building design was not resilient to withstand the shaking of magnitude 7.7 and also the 7 earthquakes in that region. Otherwise, the building can be resistant, because even we remember that the many earthquakes occurred in Japan and they are the risk resilient, they have the risk resilient structures that is not raised to ground, even the tsunami-genic earthquake of magnitude 9 in Sendai city. So this is the risk resiliency. It depends on how big are the earthquakes and how and at what depth it is occurring and what is the intensity at the site of the building, because it was dictated by many subsurface properties like alluvial amplifications, maybe the water columns, the water, the liquefactions, soil zones, and all the factors they are carrying
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So of course the design was not able to match the earthquake shaking frequency. So there was the earthquake shaking resonance taking place. or it was the more than that building damage.
All
Now
right.
you are talking that you are now, the question is here is that preparedness cannot be assessed before, because in the Bangkok as such, no earthquake seismic zone till today. There was no report of so big earthquake occurring in the Thailand itself. Okay, so it was damage with the from the other other country earthquake. So the main purposes is that we have to have the risk resilient structure. That is only solution, because this is the only way you can see the Japan and also the other cities like China, even Taiwan, even the USA and India is also taking a new building design code, because we are zonifying the seismic hazard zones into several
But
smaller
look at
zones
our
on the way.
occupation. We are so cluttered as a country. I'm not too sure how far that will be effective. You know, earthquake-resistant construction in India is a long way for us to achieve. But nonetheless, Prime Minister Modi, who spoke at our News 9 conclave today, is also committed to working towards that direction to prepare our disaster management better. But Dr. Supriya Mitra, your take on what you see. The visuals are devastating, and the scale of devastation itself hasn't yet fully been established. So in the next 24 hours, we'll know a lot more on how many more missing, how many dead. But for now, roughly 150 or 200 people who are still said to be missing, about 80, 90 said to be dead. Give us your take on this earthquake that's shaken nearly 6 nations.
Yeah, right. To add to what has already been said, I think this is an earthquake in a region which we already knew that there would be big earthquakes. What is one of the things that we need to notice is, if you look at the visuals of the buildings which are being damaged, it's mostly the older buildings which are actually being damaged. Look at the ones where you have these swimming pools pouring out water. These are newer buildings. The buildings are not damaged, which tells us that there is a way in which we can actually construct structures which will not be affected by earthquakes. And that this is the brighter side of it, in my understanding. So I think the engineers know how to deal with earthquakes. All we need to do is we need to translate the science to engineering and make sure that these codes are followed so that we build a society which is more resilient to future earthquakes.
What we see here in the visuals are basically buildings falling like a pack of cards in seconds. So do you believe that there's zero attempt to ensure that their buildings are earthquake resistant? If it could fall so easily, I could only imagine what kind of material is being used. And if this is a zone that's susceptible to seismic activity, then they should have been better prepared. I'm not too sure. We are always hailing Thailand, we're hailing Myanmar for good infrastructure, for the way they've really developed their cities. But this really speaks for another story.
Yeah, you're right. But the thing is, as I mentioned, we don't need to look at everything in one basket. There are older buildings which are not very well designed. There are newer ones which are better designed. The one that you see, the tall building which is collapsing, is actually a building which is under construction. Therefore, I think the engineering can deal with this, and we have codes which actually can make our buildings safe to earthquakes. As you heard, that there are countries where this has been done. In India, we are kind of going towards that direction. I think the newer buildings are more resilient to earthquakes. So I think, yeah, there is hope that we will get to we will be kind of getting to a point where we will be resilient as a society to big earthquakes. But we are on the way. But the other thing that we also need to understand is that, we should use the science to make our societies safer. So we now have a clear understanding of where big earthquakes can happen. We
Correct.
know
We have a
how
clear
big they are
understanding,
going to
but what if it happened to the Delhi NCR region, Kolkata, Guwahati? These are areas susceptible. Are we prepared?
actually, if there is going to be a big earthquake, it's actually going to be in the Himalayas. And if there is a big earthquake in the Himalayas, let's say in the northwestern Himalayas or in the eastern Himalayas, yes, the region just south of it, which is the Indo-Gangetic plain, is going to be affected quite severely. I think we are sort of getting prepared for it. Now, from the
And
science
Delhi
we
is
understand,
zone 4.
yes, Delhi, yes, Delhi is at a big risk from earthquakes which can happen in the Himalayas. Um, but obviously, Delhi is kind of being built up in a better way presently. Therefore, I think if we are sticking to the codes uh, of earthquake resistance, we should be more resilient to
Yeah.
future big earthquakes.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, Dr. Supriyo and sir, our panelists. I'm very short
I
on
think,
time, sir. Yeah, okay, go
I
on.
think, I think we have to lead it that the Delhi has already faced the many Himalayan earthquakes. Recently in the Nepal 2015
Yeah.
7.9 earthquake, as well as then Uttarakhand very big earthquakes we have already faced. But the resiliency depends on the several factors here. Most of the seismic wave is get attenuated reaching to Delhi. So there is no much seismic energy that caused that. You can see the 17th February 4 magnitude earthquake at 5 kilometers depth. None of the buildings showed any cracks. And those are the buildings already built on the earthquake resiliency code. So I think preparedness is the process of continuity. And once we know that how our bigger enemy is, then we can prepare. Okay. So preparedness is going on with the seismic microjonation with all building design code. BIS is now revising the code, and Indian almost all vital installations, critical structures, almost all is now risk resilient code there. After
All
the
right.
2001 Bhuj earthquake, most of the buildings are taken into account. Here, the construction of the building, the foundation is important. All well-built structure is now come down to the structure, raised to the ground, because the foundation was not made resilient. Because it is the foundation that can actually pass on the seismic shaking to the building. So if it is not attenuative foundation, it is not actually a scattering of the seismic foundation,
Right.
then it happens. You have
Okay.
seen the new structure, it happened. So it is not it was actually faulty foundations have been taken place, and that's why the building damaged.
Yeah, well, we are speaking intensely about Myanmar. I'm only worried that if this happens to Delhi and closer home, what would we do? Where would we run? You know, they say 6 degrees of separation. I think for India, it's 2 degrees. We're cluttered. There's no space. So it's going to be devastating. Let's just hope we ramp up our efforts to make this more safe for us and our people. Thanks very much for joining us on that.